All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. Just going to give a brief, what is Platypus? What are we hosting here? And then we'll kick it to the panelists to talk about the panel. I'll give you the description. Just keep in mind, after the event, we are going to head to the Anteater Pub and Grill. So if there's enough space, we can continue the conversation there. Please do come. And let me just read through kind of what Platypus is about. So the Platypus Affiliated Society, established in December 2006, organizes reading groups, public fora, research and journalism focused on the problems and tasks inherited from the old 1920s and 1930s, new 1960s, 1970s, and post-political 1980s, 1990s left for the possibilities of emancipatory politics today. We host reading groups on campus that meet at 6 on Fridays in Humanities Hall, where we talk about the history of Marxism. We do these weekly coffee breaks where we talk about current affairs on the left. We also host teach-ins. And then finally, we have the monthly publication of the Platypus Review. You can find online through platypus1917.org. On to the panel. The future of the status quo, the left after the election. As 2024 election draws near, the left appears to be at a loss to make sense of the present.
I think you're muted.
Oh, sorry. Give me 1 second. Sorry, everybody. I'll read. Can we hear me now? Did Amy say yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Very good. So I'll redo the panel description. Let's go. Okay. The future of the status quo, the left after the election. As the 2024 election draws near, the left appears to be at a loss to make sense of the present. The old neoliberal consensus was disrupted years ago by Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders. The millennial left sought to marry its project of social democracy with the Sanders platform, both as a positive attempt to get serious about politics, as well as to oppose Trump. So far, American social democracy has come to naught. The last 4 years have produced national discontent, as evidenced by the historically low approval ratings of the Biden administration. The electorate regards high inflation and an immigration crisis as failures of the current presidency. The Democrats' stronghold of organized labor has been called into question by the Teamsters' presence at the Republican National Convention. Meanwhile, thousands of protesters have mobilized against the Democrats' handling of the crises in the Middle East. Despite this, Vice President candidate Tim Walz countered that Harris has a united coalition from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift. All the while, the left has raised its own candidates as an alternative to the two parties. These developments raise a broader question of the purpose and opportunities offered by the elections to the left in general. How should a left approach the 2024 election? Would a Harris administration offer new opportunities for the left? Would a Trump administration? What is to be made of third-party candidates? Then let's do a quick intro of our panelists. First, we'll start Loriana Adriano. Loriana is a proud Filipino socialist, an undergrad student studying sociology at UCI, and has been organizing since she was 19. She represents Students for Socialism, a new student club here on the campus and a student affiliate of Party for Socialism and Liberation. As a socialist organization, PSL is involved in a wide variety of struggles, from local battles to affordable housing and union struggles, to global issues of imperialist war and a fight for a free Palestine. PSL aims to connect the everyday struggles of working people to the struggle for socialism. Next, we have Safa Nahi. Safa Nahi is a president of Titan YDSA, an ex-officio member of Orange County DSA Steering Committee, and a member of YDSA National Palestine Committee. She is a junior majoring in electrical engineering at Cal State Fullerton. Her work is currently focused on Palestine divestment and growing the student movement, having recently led the YDSA National and National SJP mass meetings for Palestine. Finally, Savannah Plaskin is a third-year political science PhD student and an elected head steward of the UAW 4811. Savannah's research interests include race, gender, representation, elections, and campaign finance. She is also a member of UC Irvine's Graduate Feminist Emphasis Program. Her current work analyzes how constituents' perceptions of members of Congress are shaped by race and gender. Savannah's research has been funded by UC Irvine's Jack W. Pelston Center for Study of Democracy and American University's New Perspectives in American Governance program. Originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, her interest in political science was sparked by her parents' engagement in grassroots political organizing. Both of her parents are union members, with her father serving as the president of Branch 84 in the National Association of Letter Carriers for several years. Savannah was a strike captain and a picket leader during the UAW 2865 strike in the fall of 2022. Each panelist will have 10 to 12 minutes for their opening remarks. We'll do 3 to 5 minutes of responding between the panelists' responses. And then finally, for the remainder of the time, we'll just do a Q&A from the audience. So in the order, is it okay if we do the order of each panelist introduction? Loriana, would you be cool with going first?
Sure.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Just to preface, I do kind of have an issue with stuttering that's been picking up lately, so I apologize if this opening statement is a little stiffer. I just think that it's best for me to read something so that I'm not just stuttering all over the place. But hello again, I'm Loriana. Again, I'm a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and I run the New Students for Socialism Club here on campus. I've been organizing with the Vote Socialist campaign for 2024 since its announcement over a year ago now. And we are running 2 working class, Black and Latina working class women for the presidency. So this is Claudia de la Cruz for president and Karina Garcia for vice president. Claudia de la Cruz is a mother, she's a popular educator and a theologian born in the South Bronx, which is the poorest congressional district in New York. She spent her life organizing for justice for working people at home and to end U.S. empire abroad. Karina Garcia is a Chicana organizer, she's a popular educator and she's a mother. And she's actually from here, from Long Beach, and she's spent her entire adult life fighting for the rights of immigrant workers, for women, and the whole of the working class. So I want to make it clear to the panel that we're not running these women out of any sort of illusions about the electoral system, about any sort of illusions that we can win. We're running to intervene in a critical historic moment in this country when there are millions upon millions of people who are disillusioned and disgusted really with the 2 choices that we have for president. You know, we have somebody who is a wannabe fascist or somebody who is a genocide in chief. You know, we'll call her like genocide girl boss. And it is disgusting that those are the 2 options that we have for presidency. To put forward an alternative, we want to put forward an alternative to working people to not only vote their conscience, but to provide an actual program to advance humanity and to organize way beyond the November election. So these 2 candidates really are just to, put them forward at a time when millions of working people in this country are actually the most engaged and paying the most attention to politics than they ever really do in their lives, right? Every 4 years, this is when most people are actually attuned to politics. So it would be really a failure of a socialist party to let this opportunity pass us by and not intervene at this moment when we could be reaching and in the ears of millions of people across this country. We're here to organize. We're organizing across this country. We've been organizing this campaign across this country from coast to coast in the big cities, but most importantly in the deep south, in the black belt, in these areas that have been historically neglected by both the Republicans and the Democrats because they can't show their face there, because they would have to confront these people who know that these politicians and these parties haven't done shit for them in the entire time that they've been in office, either party. We're here to declare to people that it is long past time that working people should be the ones to make the decisions in our society and not a tiny clique of the billionaires and the ultra-rich and their lapdogs in Washington. So we're here to say that envisioning the socialist transformation of society does not have to be a dream, that we already have the existing resources and knowledge and they exist to transform society in our interests and take the power out of the hands of ultra-rich capitalists. And yet it's still hopelessness and instability that permeate the reality of millions of us that struggle to live a life of dignity. It's difficult to be optimistic when you face a life of debt, the potential of homelessness, the potential of incarceration. The young people in this country, like myself and yourself, our friends, it's a cultural norm, right, for us to feel and talk about and joke about this pervasive sense of despair and hopelessness. I think that's just cultural for us, really. But it's not funny. Like, suicide is the leading cause of death for young people in this country. The CDC released data in 2023 citing that nearly 3 in 5 U.S. teen girls feel persistently sad or hopeless, making hopelessness a critical issue among young women. This system instills and manufactures depression and pessimism and hopelessness, and it enforces it with the power of the state, with the power of the courts and the judge and the police. So again, this campaign exists to declare in as visible of a way as possible that it does not have to be this way, that there is hope for the future, and that we need all people of conscience to take part in constructing it. The constant threat of war, deepening inequality, and climate change are the 3 major crises confronting all of humanity, and neither party has any solutions, has any real, genuine solutions to address these issues. Not to mention the genocide raging in Gaza right now, and the senseless, preventable violence in Africa, in Sudan, and the Congo. Capitalism creates these problems, and it cannot solve them. The Republican and Democratic Party establishments refuse to take immediate action to abolish debt, end racist policing, provide reliable access to healthcare, education, and housing. The two-party system is ultimately loyal to Wall Street, the corporations and the banks, empowering them and their billionaire backers to get richer while all of us get poorer. We struggle for a socialist society, to organize and plan for the people's needs. And a socialist society means that we do not have to fight for concessions, that we don't have to beg these politicians every 4 years, that we don't have to compromise on paying for life-saving drugs or on paying for our mortgages, on having places for ourselves and our families to live. And that we don't have to run in circles voting Republican or Democrat, chasing both of their empty promises for the working class. So we do fight for reforms, the small gains that make a difference now in people's lives, but it's also a political strategy, right? Because it's through struggle that we can raise people's consciousness. What we ultimately want are the big wins, revolting against the underlying system that depends on the exploitation and the oppression of workers like you and me. We are running candidates of the PSL because we believe in the organized collective struggle of the people and understand that this campaign is much more than one issue, and it's much more than this election cycle. This campaign is about all the issues that impact the working class and connecting them to the capitalist system and building a stronger movement that can win immediate demands and can look towards a socialist future. This campaign wants to get rid of the notion that it's figureheads and politicians that can save us, both within the establishment and the very politicians I'm talking about, Claudia and Karina. It's not going to be them that save us. We believe that it takes independent people's organizations that are the instrument to fight the capitalist class, the ultra-rich, the corporations, and the politicians who work to defend the capitalist system. If we're serious about liberation, we need to build outside of the two-party system. If we are serious about the liberation of ourselves from a system that does nothing but beat us down with jobs that we hate, to make money, to live half lives, a system that does nothing but instill depression and hopelessness in our hearts and minds and in the hearts and minds of young people across this country, a system that wreaks havoc and death and destruction across the globe and in our homelands, and displaced our families and ourselves from our lands, speaking for myself and any other children of immigrants in this room. We need to be serious about building something different, about building something better. When November 6th comes and goes, whichever representative, the billionaires and the warmongers get propped up into the White House, Claudia and Karina and the Party for Socialism and Liberation and the thousands on thousands moved to action by the campaign will continue to build a movement and a vehicle for real political power for working people, because we understand that we cannot continue to play into a system that plays with our rights and dangles them in front of us like a carrot on a stick. To continue to vote for the Democrats, to understand that the Democrats are our enemy because they're actively bombing and starving and genociding people in Gaza and across the world, that is the enemy. And to make our strategy for liberation, to continue to trust and vote for our enemy, that is political suicide, and that is not a strategy for liberation. And we understand that we cannot continue to commit suicide, to teach our children to commit suicide, that this is not a strategy for liberation, and we need to push people away from this. We cannot continue to legitimize a system that normalizes genocide, that applauds and empowers these war criminals like Trump, like Harris, like Biden, and the rest. So ultimately, I want to end this with a call to action. Take a look at the Vote Socialist program. It's votesocialist2024.com. And just really genuinely take a look And if you agree that we as workers deserve to take back what is ours in the first place, if you agree that the people of Gaza and the third world deserve dignity and humanity and the right to self-determination, if you believe that we as working people are capable and right to say that we should be the ones making decisions for our society and not a dictatorship of the rich, build with us. Don't vote for the Dems. Don't vote for genocide. Real change is possible, and it is necessary, and I invite every person in this room to build something different with this campaign and way beyond it.
Let's continue, yeah.
Okay. So hello everyone. I want to thank Ismail, for the introduction. My name is Safa. I'm from Titan YDSA, and personally, after looking at this 2024 election, I've noticed that although that the election is supposed to bring us opportunities and opportunities for progression and change in this society, unfortunately in this case and in past cases there hasn't been a effective improvement. And so the 4 questions that were proposed on this panel to answer today is to find a probable solution on how to approach the election as a left-wing party or as progressives. So we could start with the basics. The system isn't designed for us. It is built to protect wealth and uphold the status quo. And so I don't think we should ignore it. That is an obvious thing that has been to a lot of voters, especially in the previous elections. And elections have real impacts on the material conditions of millions of working people, and ignoring them means leaving our communities vulnerable to decisions made without us. But we also can't depend solely on the system to deliver the kind of transformative change we're after. Our approach then has to be both tactical and principled. First, we can use the election to raise our issues, mobilize people around them, and organize communities, which is what YDSA National has been trying to do with national calls all over the country. And universal health care, climate action, housing rights, labor rights, as my fellow panelist has mentioned. And yes, foreign policy issues like justice for Palestine, these should be front and center to candidates. And elections are a chance to amplify our message, not just pick the candidates, but the focus shouldn't be limited to a single election. Voting is one tool in our kit, but the real work happens on the ground. We just need to use this moment to build solidarity, organize across neighborhoods, workplaces, and campuses, and grow a base that can keep fighting regardless of who's in power. So if we look at the 2 administrations that are proposed to us, which is Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, unfortunately, they, from what we've seen, they're not advancing options. If we consider the Kamala Harris administration, for example, Harris will likely continue the legacy of neoliberalism. And we've seen from recent Democratic leaders, her record shows that while she might use the language of progressivism, she has consistently supported policies that maintain the status quo, particularly in criminal justice and foreign policy. So we shouldn't expect a drastic shift under her leadership. However, there are opportunities here. A Harris administration will still, while still limited by corporate influence, would at least be publicly committed to progressive values, at least in theory. This creates a kind of soft target for the left where we can push for meaningful action on issues she claims to support. For instance, on topics like climate action, we can mobilize to hold her accountable for actual policy changes, not just lip service. And on issues like the U.S. role in Palestine, her administration should be pressured by the public demands to reevaluate unconditional military aid and shift towards a human rights-focused foreign policy. And this has been an issue for so many years and so many elections. And if you go out, I had a woman polling for voters in my area, and every single person that she asked every single person had an issue with foreign policy. And so there needs to be some more organizing and public pressure towards these candidates so we can gain an improvement for foreign policy. So by organizing around these issues and exposing gaps between rhetoric and reality, we can draw in more people and build momentum for structural change, even if the administration itself is reluctant to deliver. So while Harris may not be the progressive leader we need, her administration claims still can be leveraged by our own movement to make some gains and highlight the limitations of mainstream liberalism. But if we talk about a return to a Trump administration, there's no question that another Trump presidency would embolden reactionary forces, from xenophobia to racism to attacks on labor and democratic rights. Trump's stance on issues like immigration, worker protections, and military spending shows us exactly what we should expect: a wave of policies that roll back social and economic protections and even greater emphasis on corporate power. In some ways, the harshness of a Trump administration could serve as a wake-up call, forcing people to see extremes of system and drawing more people into movements for change. Under Trump's last term, we saw massive protests, from racial justice demonstrations to calls for immigrant rights, which engaged and radicalized many people who might otherwise not have been mobilized. His administration highlighted the worst elements of the system, and people responded. But let's be clear, Trump would also pose serious risks to the very rights and freedoms we rely on to organize. We need to be vigilant in defending vulnerable communities and protecting our ability to protest and resist. Organizing under a Trump administration will require a strong focus on protecting what we've won, resisting attempts to undo it. We need to build networks and coalitions that can understand the administration's attacks and expand on the reach of our movement, using each policy as a rallying point to show the failures of the system as a whole. So while a Trump presidency could radicalize some and create opportunities for mass mobilization, it would be a very, very difficult road. Demanding an approach that prioritizes defense, solidarity, and sustained resistance. So now we turn to the question, like, what would be made of third-party candidates? For many of us, a third-party candidate reflects our values more closely. Whether it's the Green Party, Socialist Alternative, or others, these candidates often represent issues we care about, like universal health care, climate action, workers' rights, and to end imperialism. They challenge the two-party system and bring real issues to the forefront, including justice for Palestine and break from militarized foreign policy. But there's a problem. Third-party candidates face an enormous amount of structural barriers. Lack of media access, restrictive ballot requirements, and the spoil is the narrative that paints of a vote for them as a waste to make it difficult for them to gain traction, which I honestly completely disagree. I don't believe that if you vote socialist, I don't think you are wasting your vote. I think you're proving towards the two parties that there is a third option, and we could break the system of a two-party system. So, however, a third party could serve a purpose in our strategy by supporting candidates who champion socialism and radical reforms. We keep pushing the conversation left, challenging the mainstream parties to address the issues they ignore. Every vote for a third-party candidate becomes a statement, a call for an alternative that goes beyond the stale policies of both major parties. While they may not win today, third-party candidates play a critical role in building a base, growing consciousness, and inspiring people to think that beyond the status quo. Supporting them is about building movement that in time could shift the landscape enough to make a real electoral success possible. So I want to end this with a call for action as well. And as we look at the 2024 election, I want us all to remember that while voting has a role, it's not the whole story. Our power lies in ability to organize, to demand change, to hold both candidates accountable. And Kamala Harris administration will allow us to push on policies where she claims progressivism pacifism. A Trump administration required defensive organizing and solidarity. Third-party candidates, meanwhile, offer a chance to advocate for the world we want beyond the limits of the system. So let's take the opportunity to engage, but never lose sight of our goal. We want a world where people come before profits, where justice is global, and where solidarity drives our policy. Not corporate interests. That vision demands more than any single election. It demands a movement that is resilient, determined, and unyielding. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here today on a Friday, and thank you so much for putting together this panel. I'm super excited to be here. Like I was introduced before, my name is Savannah, she, her, hers. I am a third-year political science PhD student here at UC Irvine. I work as a teaching assistant during the academic year and a graduate student researcher in the summer. I am also one of the elected head stewards of UAW 4811, which is our union of our graduate student workers here at UC Irvine, and part of UAW 4811, which is the grad workers across the 10 UC campuses and the San Francisco and Berkeley lab. So also, I did not prepare as beautifully and eloquent opening statements as you guys. I think that because I get up and I talk in front of people for, almost every day for a living, I'm a little too comfortable. So if it's not as eloquent as the two previous panelists, I apologize. I kind of think I want to start by talking about the power of union organizing and labor organizing, and why I believe it's kind of one of the last grassroots political actions that has some, push in the system, really. Again, this is all very, very limited. We have to keep in mind that our political institutions and systems are set up to limit and suppress the views of working class people, and keeps corporate interests and money in mind. Just look at AIPAC and who they've thrown money at. I think they've spent money on 336 congressional primary races, and 332 of those times the AIPAC candidate won. So this is, it's really hard to go up against and make any kind of dent in the system. And to some extent, union organizing is a tool that we can still use and leverage to work within the system, although how broken it is, to try to organize people around labor and their wants and demands. I want to, before I start talking about the election, point to the 2022 strike 2 years ago. The graduate student worker union was on strike for 6 weeks, and we ended up getting what was a very historic labor contract. 2 years ago, our starting salary for ATA was $2,300 a month. As of next month, the starting salary is now $3,700. So that alone is about a $10,000 increase in annual wages, which is life-changing for many people who live paycheck to paycheck. So by working, as a collective labor movement, we're still seeing that we have the power to actually extract some of our demands and our wants and our needs from our employers, which is something that we're seeing is becoming increasingly hard to do. And then the reason why I kind of bring this up and why this is important is because, I was going to call it the elephant in the room. Now I guess I can call it the donkey in the room, and that is that UAW has endorsed Kamala Harris for president. And this has caused a great bit of tension amongst some in our union, who point out that we are backing a candidate who has aided in Israel's genocide. And, I don't want to sit and be like, oh, well, she's this amazing progressive champion who's going to bring us wins, because I truly don't believe that. But it's also that I think part of the reason why we endorsed her is because we view a Kamala Harris presidency would have the opportunity to have UAW or formal organized union labor would have some kind of capacity or seat at the table. And I will say that as a local here at Region 6, we have spent a good, if not even good, almost all of our organizing efforts around local candidates and specific ballot initiatives and propositions instead of campaigning for the Harris campaign. So we're campaigning for local House races, state Senate and state House seats, as well as propositions that are on ballots. I know a few weeks ago, a group of workers went to Arizona and campaigned for a proposition that was on the ballot there. So as a union, I think a question that we get a lot is, well, why do you still endorse many of these mainstream Democratic candidates? And that is because we view them as still, we view our union as being able to still have some kind of seat at the table and being able to, although acknowledging that this is a system that is not designed for us, that this is not a system that prioritizes working class people's wants and needs, that we still can flex our collective power and our muscle together to try to work with them to get it. Now, by no means are these people going to save us. By no means are these people going to change the system, but they are a tool that we can use to work with. In 2022, we had Mayor Khan at the picket with us. We had Bernie Sanders and a lot of other leaders on, I guess, I don't want to say the left, but what you'd call the more left-leaning wing of the Democratic Party endorse our strike, and that, helped us gain the momentum and the traction that we used and that we needed to win this historic contract. In terms of what a Kamala Harris administration would offer the left, I mean, I've talked a lot about, organized labor and how, the Biden administration, I would say, would be one of the most pro-labor administrations in modern political history, but that's a very, very, very low bar to clear. I'm not saying that as a compliment or a laud, but he was one of the only, I think the only American president to ever be at a picket line. So we're seeing at least some willingness by his administration, and that we would hope by Kamala Harris administration, to help pass the PRO Act, to, back other local Democratic Party candidates who may be willing to work with unions and come to the picket line and support other positions that our union supports as well too. However, I do think that it would be very disingenuous to not acknowledge all the drawbacks and the limitations and just the general disappointment as well that I think Kamala Harris administration would bring. Just watching her campaign is, very, not that this neoliberal, hell that we live in ever produces feelings of optimism, but I was watching the CNN town hall where somebody asked her a question about the border wall and would she support building a border wall, and she literally said something along the lines of, oh, well, I'm in favor of a good idea no matter who says it. And I was like, well, that's not what you were saying 8 years ago, but just this kind of, I think we're at a point now where we're using politics as, or at least she's campaigning with how can I win the most votes, how can I win the most people over, and we're now looking at a Democratic Party that has a tent big enough for Dick Cheney, who is a war criminal, but not Palestine activists. And I think that is a horrible position to be in. So there is this kind of, question of what specific issues and opportunities for the left would Kamala Harris bring. I think she would be infinitely better than Trump would on any labor issue, on any workers' rights issue. I think that she would probably put in, or at least push for more pro-choice policy, I would hope. But then again, the Biden administration didn't codify Roe v. Wade, so I don't know how far they'd be willing to go. But in terms of things like immigration or Palestine, I think she would be very disappointing. I don't want to sit and be like, oh, she'd be wonderful, but I think it would be awful. So that's why I think it's important to continuously organizing after November 6th and just keep, everything in the context of this is a broader movement, that we're always contributing to and building towards. And this isn't just we're going to vote on election day, and if X number of Democratic candidates win, then, we get to party for the next 4 years. We saw the Democratic Party have a majority in the House, Senate, and the presidency in 2020. And other than the Build Back Better plan, we didn't see any substantial bills or anything systematically change. I see I'm doing time. Okay, I have a few minutes left. I don't think a Donald Trump administration would offer anything of substance to the left. The only thing I think I could say would be him being reelected. And as somebody who studies elections, I honestly do think he is going to win reelection. I really do. I think that maybe not even would be a wake-up call, but I think something about him just activates so many people who normally would be, who are complacent under a Biden administration, who would be complacent under a Kamala Harris administration. I remember I went to the Women's March in D.C. in 2017 after he was elected, and somebody had a sign there, and it said, "If Hillary was president, we'd all be at brunch." And I was like, that... So you're just getting you think Hillary Clinton's the answer? So I think there's almost kind of like he would maybe spark some or agitate some such negative affects that maybe we would have people organizing and rallying who normally wouldn't be because they view Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party as the answer. But with that being said, echoing everything you said as well, I think he would be as bad as Harris is on so many issues. He would be infinitely worse. And I think he would be an immediate threat to many marginalized communities, anybody who was seeking reproductive health care, their health and safety would be at risk. So I think as much as, Kamala Harris is not the future of leftism and won't save anybody, neither is Trump. And as uninspiring as she is, he is worse. One last thing before I know I'm probably closing in on time, but I think that third-party candidates this cycle are going to probably get 2% of the general election vote, and that makes me very excited and cautiously optimistic and hopeful. We are seeing so many people disillusioned, so many people pushing back against the notion that it has to be just these two parties, especially with the uncommitted movement that we saw running during the Democratic primary. This doesn't mean that our electoral systems are going to drastically change, but it's my hope that, this is the start of a movement that will one day, maybe decades from now, we're going to have ranked choice voting, or decades from now, there'll be viable third-party candidates running for House and Senate races. So I think that third-party candidates offer, one, immediate hope for a future, two, casting a vote for somebody who, for many people, gives them a feeling of moral consciousness. You're not voting for a wannabe fascist, and you're not voting for a person helping Israel commit a genocide, but you're voting for somebody who aligns with your views. And lastly, it'd be my hope that they would be voting for these candidates would hopefully push a movement later on, and a movement that would represent the needs of working class and labor better than the two parties currently are now.
So I want to open the floor for just a couple, before we open the floor to the Q&A, I want to do at least 3 to 5 minutes of responses among the panelists. So I'm just curious what questions each one of you have for another, and then we'll respond to those and then move to the audience.
I have a question about how UAW do they have any answers to Biden's historic shutdown of the rail workers strikes in 2022? Is there any official statements or in endorsing Kamala and considering that she was part of that administration?
I think with that, it's been that's a reason why he was not immediately endorsed by Sean Fain and UAW. It's very, I'm not going to sit and say that everything he did was fantastic. I don't know if there was an exact statement about that. I know, obviously, the Biden administration was very involved with the UAW, the Big Three auto worker strike, but with the rail worker strike, I know behind the scenes is NLRB has been very progressive, but it's also frustrating that he almost feels pressure to not take an overtly facing, pro-labor stance. I want to say I don't think there was an official statement released. Don't hold me to it because there could have been. But I think that's a reason why Sean Fain waited and didn't immediately endorse Biden too.
So, any other panelists' questions for one another? No? Okay. So then we'll spend the rest of the time in our Q&A. Let me actually unmute the audience. You're all muted. Yeah?
It's a general question, it's not for a specific person, but previously we know that millennial left was a driver of left movement, and now, as you mentioned, there are more Gen Z people voting, and this time it will be the second election that Gen Z actually votes, right? Because 2020, yeah. So do you see any differences between millennial left and Gen Z left? And do you see the potential for Gen Z left to learn from the failures of the millennial left? And what are these specific lessons that you see Gen Z can learn?
Can shoot. I don't think there's any important differences between millennials and Gen Z on the left. Like, I think that whatever there is like kind of like silly like online discourse about like, I don't know, I see a lot of Gen Z people like dunking on millennials for being like into Harry Potter or like whatever. It's like, I don't care about that. Like, we're like, the millennials kind of led the way in being like the first ones to get like really disillusioned by capitalism and by the American dream, because they were the first ones really to lose any sort of like opportunities like after graduating from college, and really be the first ones to be like, oh shit, like we have no opportunities. This country is not offering us opportunities, and there's no way to own a home, to have the American dream, to even think about supporting like children. So I think that there's no real use in harping on any differences between the millennials and the Gen Zs. Because like I really follow in like the steps of honestly like a lot of like millennial organizers in my life, and really they're wiser on a lot of different issues, and they've obviously been in the movement longer. So I think that really more than anything, like it's important for us to be in solidarity and not have any sort of divisions over a couple years. Yeah.
Oh, I would. Can
Please, let's finish the question.
Okay, did you want to?
Oh, yeah. So I personally probably would say that I do see a difference, at least in the community that I live in right now. And from hearing from different millennials and, Gen Z students and just regular people, they tell me that, so millennials are saying one thing. Most of them are losing faith from the last election, and most of them that I've spoken to want to step out of the vote, and they just don't want to vote. They don't see a point in voting. They don't feel like their vote makes a difference because they voted last election, and their hopes were basically distracted by the Biden administration. So, and that influence I've seen is influencing the Gen Z generation of voters, and it's just like there are some Gen Z voters that are like, oh, okay, well, if my dad's not going to vote, then I'm not going to vote either, because like there's no point. And I think that what we should, the mentality that we should actually approach this election with is that, for example, a third-party option should be a viable option, because we could break that two-party system. And that mentality of like, oh, my vote isn't going to do anything or it's not going to change anything, it needs to be like millennials need to leave that mentality, because I've seen that there are so many millennials that keep that mentality of like, oh, my vote's not going to do anything, or like, oh, I have to vote one Democrat over the Republican because Democrats are like a less bad. So it's like a majority of a lot of different ideologies that have like progressed, and I feel like we need to, you know, think a lot more progressively and like optimistically that our vote actually does have an impact, and we need to like I mentioned before, we need to organize and actually gain a lot of people into the voting pool, so there is a greater like pressure for change. So yeah,
I think that honestly, if you really think about it, there's some similarities overlapping between these two generations. I mean, for millennials, I think the two defining, major events for that generation was the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, and then the Wall Street crisis, and kind of how those two acts really, or not acts, but these two events really distorted, people's hope and faith in, mainstream politics, and that was kind of like the start of, the Bernie Sanders movement and our revolution. And then I think when I say our revolution, I'm referring to the group, not like there's a UAW revolution happening somewhere. And then for Gen Z, it was COVID, and then obviously now Israel's genocide in Gaza. So I think that the way I view it is a lot of the core ideas and values that the millennials pushed for in like the 2015 to 2017 organizers were pushing for, like universal health care, free college and tuition, and a $15 minimum wage. They were seen as very radical and, fever dreams back then. And although we don't have them now, they don't seem as much as fever dreams. We're having more candidates who are running on Medicare for all. We're having people now come out in favor of $17 and $18 minimum wages. We have a minimum wage for fast food workers in California that's higher than $15, although there's a bunch of very shitty rules around that. But a lot of, I guess the point I'm trying to get at is that I kind of view this as continuing or taking on the torch and trying to push for ideas that, 9-10 years ago we thought were very, very left-leaning, to try to continue to make them more mainstream, and then to create these ideas and dreams and imagining a new political future so that generations after us can fight for these policies and platforms and ideas.
Sure.
So one of the distinctions that kind of in the background of the conversation, of the introductory remarks, is the streets versus the ballots. Like, what is the relationship between the movement, and that kind of community activism to electoral politics? And so my question to the panelists is, how do you understand the relationship between your electoral activism to building a social movement? Because it does seem that each of you are affiliated to a different organization that does different forms of social activism that relates to electoral work in different ways. And I'd like to see how the panelists understand their work, but also how they sort of think about their work in relation to what the other panelists are doing, if you agree or disagree.
We can just continue the order unless somebody's compelled, they could speak. Yeah.
Okay, that's a really good question. I think that, again, like I said, I'm part of a national organization, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, and yes, we are running in the presidential campaign with two candidates for presidency and vice presidency. And we're proud to continue the Leninist tradition of running candidates in popular elections and in elections. And that doesn't mean that we limit our scope to elections and to the electoral system, because again, as I said, that would be ridiculous. We're not going to win. Claudia and Karina are not going to be president and vice president of the United States. I think this is restating a lot of what I said in my opening statement. But again, this is a moment that really happens only once every 4 years, that most people in this country are actually tuned in to politics for the first time in a very long time. Because again, the majority of the people in this country are very disillusioned with the two-party system. The majority of the people in this country don't vote. They understand that the system doesn't work for us, and they don't put too much stock into it, and they're not engaged into it. So this is a moment where we really need to take the opportunity to get into as many ears as possible and say, hey, we know that this system is not working for you. We are your fellow working people in your communities and in your neighborhoods who are pushing for something different, who are pushing for not only reform, but ultimately revolution. So in California specifically, we understand that, like, as Californians, your vote does not matter. Kamala's gonna win. Kamala's gonna win in this state. So especially here in California, we've really been pushing for Claudia and Karina votes. And obviously, again, not because they're gonna be president, but because we think it's important to show the people of this country and show the ruling class that people not only want reform, but people want the upturning of capitalism, and people want the overthrow of this dictatorship of the rich that has been forced on all of us. So that's why we think that a vote for Claudia and Karina over, honestly, the Greens and Cornel West, with no shade, because love to Jill Stein and Cornel West, great work. But we think that our political program advances solutions beyond reform and solutions beyond the system that I just haven't seen from the rest of the third-party candidates.
Do we vote? Oh, okay. Yeah, I actually agree with what Loriana said. We, like, as YDSA, our whole main, like, goal on everything is to organize. We organize, we make national calls, and right now we're actually, having people sign petitions based on divestment, based on Palestinian organizing. We've been helping the students of Justice of Palestine on our campus and other campuses as well. We've also connected with SJP-UCI here. So we, our whole goal is trying to rile people up saying that, you know, action is change. And as Loriana said, like, change comes by the masses. So we're trying to get as many people as we can to also help them and make them understand that, you know, they have a voice, and change is possible, and public pressure is needed. So using the ideologies and, like, you know, ideas of YDSA, we're using that to promote, you know, workers' rights and, like, labor union rights and, like, you know, Palestinian rights and, like, fundraising for Gaza and, like, a bunch of all of these humanitarian aid opportunities that we're offering to help people understand, as Loriana said, like, there is a third option, and, you know, it's not just a two-party system. The two-party system is what, you know, we are told that it's our only option. So, yeah, that's most of everything that I've gathered.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree in any aspect. Obviously, a big part of union is organizing in the long term and, you know, showing up and protecting the rights of your fellow workers. When we had a postdoc who was experiencing harassment on campus, we organized a rally and a sit-in in his office. When myself and others were arrested on May 15th, we literally went on strike to get our student conduct and our criminal charges dropped. I mean, part of, you know, the union's power is that we have a variety of other tools. Like you said, voting is just one tool in our toolkit. We have a variety of other actions and items and ways we can agitate and educate and organize our coworkers with. And although, because we're in, you know, a general election cycle right now, a good chunk of our resources is going to supporting candidates who we believe are pro-labor, who we believe will help give us a seat at our table and fight for the issues that we care about. In the long term, voting is just a very, very small piece of the cake that when it comes to organizing and building long-term goals.
Yeah.
First of all, I'll say thank you all for coming out and taking the time to answer these questions. This is just a general question for all of you. From what you guys have said, there is a somewhat of an undercurrent of like one of the reasons that probably to vote for the Democrats and Kamala Harris is that like even though she is still part of the same establishment, her presidency just by the fact of being like outwardly progressive could offer the context for allowing more progressive actions to take place. So, for example, one of you mentioned under Biden's presidency, there was a lot of labor action, and he was one of the most pro-labor ones. So I would like to hear this panel's answer to what some electoralists are saying. One of the most important reasons to vote for Kamala Harris this election is because for all of the strength that the Republicans show, there is critical weaknesses that they need to address this election. For example, the fact that Donald Trump has no real heir or like front runner. His VP literally called him Hitler, so he doesn't really have options to pass on the torch. So they argue that the importance of voting for Kamala over a third party is to deal a critical blow to Republicans right now, because if they lose Trump, and he is very old, he might not run again. If they lose Trump, they might not be able to get the same amount of power. So it's very important to defeat them now to provide that context. I would want to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
I think that if we're going to talk about strategies for working class power and for working class liberation, I think that dealing a blow to the Republicans, supposedly now when they're at their weakest, just for somebody like Biden or Harris to be president, we've dealt a blow to the Republicans to get Harris in the presidency. I think there are people in Kamala Harris's proposed cabinet for 2024 that are behind the writing of Project 2025. And I can't give you names, but I know that that is a fact. Harris represents the same exact interests that Trump pushes forward in the White House. Like, she might pay lip service, her and Biden might pay lip service, but in the last 16 years, 12 years of that has been under a Democratic presidency, and yet every 4 years we're saying, like, vote for us because we need to make change. Change from you, because you were in the White House. You had control of all of, like, of all the branches of government. I don't put any stock into dealing a critical blow against the Republicans to put Democrats into power, because I don't give a shit about either the Republicans or the Democrats, because they don't give a shit about me or my family or my friends. I think that it's really on us to build with ourselves, to build with our communities, to build with people who actually live lives like us, actually have the same interests as us, and to not put any more stock into a system and a party that pays lip service but continues to stab us in the back at every given turn. And I haven't even talked about Gaza at all or foreign policy at all in what I just said, but you want to add that into the mix, and it's like, these people cannot be taken seriously. Like, they are genociders, they are warmongers, they're backed by Harris is backed by even more billionaires than Trump is. No stock into genocide girl boss and whatever else she might have to say. Whenever I see a Kamala Harris ad like pop up on whatever, like, it ruins my day. Period.
Yeah, I vouch for everything that you just said, honestly. Yeah, a lot of people I've heard, like I said before, they think Kamala Harris is the only, the less bad choice, which makes her the best choice. But I mean, as if we've seen, as if we've seen as her administration, like in Biden's administration, they never turned Roe versus, they never overturned that. And like they promised right before they were elected, they were like, yeah, vote for us. I promise I'll overturn Trump's executive order of like Roe versus Wade, and I'll give people more jobs. That's what Biden said almost all the time. And like instead, we've seen a decrease of like jobs, especially in the IT department. There has been so many layoffs, and it's just like I personally, of the Democratic Party, they want to be the more predominant party because they want to stay in power. And the longer that it is a two-party system, they will stay in power. And so we just have to, like I said before, like pressure for a third-party candidate, because we need to break that power. It's like turning from like a capitalistic society it's stemming towards a dictatorship, and it's impacting a lot of people, U.S. citizens, especially foreign U.S. citizens who worked so hard to get into this country. So I'm the same way. A Kamala Harris administration, I value it as equal as a Trump administration, and is no part of, I don't want any part of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I can't really say anything like extremely substantively different. I mean, I think that Trump ideologically is honestly very similar to most if not all other Republicans. I mean, he holds like the pomp and circumstance of the transition of power, and presenting as, this very like established, like proper political figure. He doesn't have that, but I honestly think that if anything, just him, he like activates people and gets people to, he says things without the dog whistles, so people look at what he's saying and they actually, like, some people are alarmed into action when normally they wouldn't be. So I don't think that the future of the left or anything that the left does should be strategically uploaded Trump or killing Trump, because whatever Republican steps up next, whether it be DeSantis or Haley or Vivek Ramaswamy or another Bush, is probably going to be substantively the same on 98% of the issues. Just maybe they'll say things toned down but still have the same viewpoints as him.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm noticing on the panel are some of the interesting similarities when it comes to organizing. I guess just picking up on a couple of the threads from the audience, I was just curious. It's almost like, and I really appreciate how everyone's highlighting their discussion of, history, the millennials, this moment. But I'm just curious, how do you all make of this issue of, there's a lot of continuity we feel between the millennial left and then Gen Z. But all of the left organizing among the millennials, it amounted to Trump. Mm-hmm. And that amounted to Biden. And if what you said is correct, it goes back to Trump. So I guess one of my questions would be, how do we make sense of the tactics and lessons of organizing that we've gained over the past couple decades of most immediate politics? And, why did this end up leading to Trump again? And why does that seem to be the fate of our, at least seemingly, this upcoming political election? So we could do whatever order.
I feel like I have because Kamala Harris is running a horrible campaign. Like, it is atrociously, not that, again, she's this awe-inspiring candidate, but when you go on The View and you say you're going to have a Republican in your cabinet, and you say that there's room in the party for Taylor Swift to Dick Cheney, but there's not room for Palestine activists, and you're silencing them at the DNC, you're literally making it hard on yourself to win. Like, that's why I really do, and people kind of look at me, they're like, oh, I hear it's a toss-up. I really do think it's more of like a 75% chance Trump is going to be reelected. Like, there is a chance she might win, but I really do think that it's going to be him again. And that is because our politics has become, I guess this is getting a little too into the academic side of the thing, our politics has become so polarized that it's now just, we've run candidates for House and Senate and the presidency, whose entire platform is just being not, I don't want to say being not the other side, because you'll have, Harris say, oh, I'm going to have a Republican in my cabinet, but it's just catering to this imaginary centrist swing voter who, based on what polling shows us, is no more likely. There's more people who would get out the vote if Harris pivoted to the left and, actually started maybe trying to pretend to work towards a ceasefire and, started fighting for Medicare for all and didn't, run on immigration stances that are similar to Trump. Like, there's more votes to be had by bringing in new people than trying to pivot and swing so far to the center that you're actually hitting the right. So I think that is why we have Trump. Like, I think she's running a uniquely awful campaign. And I've also, I'm not sure if anybody watches Hassan Piker, he's a Twitch streamer, but there's a quote and he was like, if she just would call for a ceasefire, I would be out knocking on fucking doors for her. And again, not that her presidency alone would save us, but I think that is a sentiment that many people feel like if she just was 3 steps less awful and just tried a little bit, you would have so many people actually getting out the vote for her, being enthused, and now you have so many people who are literally voting for her only because she's not Trump and not that she has any redeeming qualities or platforms or policies. So I think, and that's kind of why, I probably personally, I don't think I'm going to vote for her. I mean, a union endorses her. I understand that endorsement. I think it makes sense because as an organized labor union, she might give us a seat at the table, but I think she's, she's not running a good campaign, and I think that's why it's going to be Trump again. That was very long-winded. Sorry.
So Trump's administration has been doing a smear campaign, and that's how they won in 2016. And honestly, I see them winning this year as well. They've been running a smear campaign against Kamala Harris, and it's just like Kamala Harris hasn't been advocating. She's been playing on both sides. In the beginning of her election, she was like, oh yeah, the people of Gaza have a right to defend themselves. And then a few weeks later, she flipped and was like, oh, so I will not stop funding Israel. It's just, at this point, I don't know if she's sticking to her true ideologies, or a matter of fact, I don't know if she truly believes in her ideologies. Yeah, she is maybe a democratic left, but I don't know if she truly believes in the ideologies of the democratic left. I think she's just copy and pasting what Biden did in the last election and just using that to prolong his presidency but be in his place. I personally, from what's been happening and what's been coming out, is just she's kind of, I agree with you, she's kind of ruining it for herself. and I just don't see, at this point, it just really does feel like the Trump administration is just going to go into re-election and, we're kind of screwed. But yeah, so, it's just, I feel like a way we can maybe, a way of guidance towards millennial leftists and Gen Z, I think what we could do is just, start networking, start organizing, start speaking up, and how most of them went out in protest during Trump's administration. I feel like the more people we have out there and the more anger we have in the streets, I think there will come a change. During George Floyd's protests, we had a lot of effective organizing and a lot of effective movement, and I truly believe it made an impact. It made an impact. So I think we just need more of it, because at this point, the Trump administration has a very high likelihood of winning.
And if I have a super quick two-finger, because I realized I didn't answer the first part of your question, I got so excited talking about election predictions. If you can't organize to win at the ballot box, You can organize your workplace. You can organize with your fellow comrades and coworkers in other places that don't necessarily have to be the ballot box. And I think that's going back to the example that I pointed to of our union being on strike in 2022. Yes, it was good that we had politicians and figures endorsing us and showing up at the picket line, but that was largely created by our members, and that was a win that happened because we had tens of thousands of TAs on strike at the same time. So, I mean, the answer might be to focus our organizing efforts into other places.
I just wanted to clarify like the question, because you were talking about, it's specifically that it was like millennial organizing that led to like the switch between like Trump, Biden.
Well, I was just trying to note that it's interesting that we were learning, well, at least between the two of you, they were more explicit about the differences. There was this idea that we don't have that much different from the millennials, really. Like, there's maybe the class dimension. So the question sort of is, if there's not that much difference, and we saw what the Iraq War protests, what, the early 21st century has sort of led to, it led to something like, what is it, like a Kamala, no, first it was a Clinton, bureaucratic kind of opposition from the Democratic Party against Trump. Then Trump wins, and then there's radical protests, and he loses, and then we have the Democrats, who seemingly are just like a similar, right, type of administrative force, and then we have seemingly Trump again. So if there's not the difference, at least for you here, between the millennials, what are we doing different, or what is really going to be different, or what are sort of the lessons you would take away from that? Maybe what happened is that the millennials have led us to something like a Trump. Maybe there's an inadequacy of something. Is that being addressed today?
Okay, I like that question. So I think there's like an implication in there that like, it's like what you're talking about, like some sort of like failure like on the millennials that somehow like led to the election of like both Trump or Biden. And that's something that I don't think is true. I think that, these kind of football matches of like it being passed, like the Republicans and the Democrats, these are the movements and the machinations of the ruling class. These are not something that are the results of any movements on our end to elect them, because again, like, even when we do participate in electoral politics, we're not actually the ones who be putting these people in office. Like, Trump lost the popular vote, and he still got into office. Like, these are not our movements, and these are not our makings, and this is not our system. So I think, like, we can't think about it like that, as in, like, it's the millennials' fault that we are in this situation now, anything like that. I think that, again, like, it goes back to, like, solidarity and being conscious of the fact that it's not, that the generation gap is not anything meaningful that divides us. The only meaningful divide when it comes to fighting for the liberation of working people, fighting for the liberation of people across this world, is the divide between the people who hold the power and who are carrying out the interests of the billionaires and the warmongers, versus the people who just want to provide for their families and normal working people. So that's my.
We had other questions. Yeah.
What do you think is going to happen within the next 10, 15 years? That as the older generation is phased out of the electorate and the voting population, and it's a nice way of putting it, as the sort of capital that they've accumulated is unlocked through intergenerational wealth, and do you think it'll motivate progressive and leftist politics through having more of the share, or do you think there'll be a sort of stifling effect that now that I've achieved sort of what has been owed to me, I can sort of put down the banner?
So as to what will happen in the next 10 to 15 years, nobody has a crystal ball, but I think that the situation that we are in versus the situation of like the boomers or like the older generations is qualitatively different. Like when the boomers and the older generations were in our position and were in the millennials' position, they were buying houses and they were starting families, and they had a lot more access to the quote-unquote American dream. So I think that's part of what makes these younger generations, you and me, so much more radical and so much more left. Just because the system, the class system, is much clearer for us to observe, and the failures of capitalism to actually provide a life for ourselves and our families is much more clear. But just as to what will happen in the next 10 to 15 years, I think that the crises of capitalism will continue to intensify. We see a new one every couple of years when it comes to like 2008, to the banks crashing and the banks getting bailed out, to 2016 when Trump got elected and there was this mass pushback from the progressives, to 2020, to the murder of George Floyd, and this kind of like massive change in consciousness in millions and millions of people across this country to actually understand that the police don't protect us. They're not on our side. To now, to 2024, when just a few years ago, even to think of like 10, 20 years ago, the issue of Palestine was an issue that divided the left. It was not a popular movement, and it was not a popular issue. If you talk to anti-war organizers, I know anti-war organizers who have been organizing for Palestine since like 20 years ago, and they can tell you that 20 years ago, Palestine was a divisive issue, because people on the left would be like, we can't talk about Palestine, like that would not be good, like that's too radical, like it's too complicated what's happening in Israel and Palestine. But now where we're at this moment where so many people's consciousness has been changed and actually moved towards understanding the system that we are up against, this is where I think it's important to be organized, and I personally think it's important to be in a political party, that can weather all of these movements, because all of these movements will ebb and flow. All of these movements will go up and down. We're seeing with Palestine, it is still strong, but the movement for Palestine has ebbed since the beginning of 2023. So what happens when the movement slows down and eventually ebbs, as it always will? We need a political party to take all of these people who are energized and mobilized and actually organize them and build them into cadre and build them into conscious people who can take the lessons of all of these other huge working class struggles and channel them and keep them like in a memory, in how do I say this? In a collective memory, and I think that's what a political party provides. That's personally why I'm in a political party, especially a Marxist-Leninist socialist party. But yeah, that's why just whatever happens in the next 10 to 15 years, it's important to be organized. It's important to be building a genuine people's movement. It's important to be in organizations. It doesn't have to be a party. Just organize. Because if you are not, we need to move millions across this country in order to get what we actually need and deserve. So if you are not moving more people than yourself, join an organization.
Yeah, in the next 15 years, I share that perspective. I think capitalism will only intensify. I mean, like, when my dad first came to America, it was a lot easier for him to, get a house and provide for a family than it is now. There are people, like, out on the streets, especially if you go into military service. There are veterans on the streets that the government came and provide for those veterans, and they serve their own country. So it's like, how I think about it is that it's really important to organize, and I actually think that the Gaza situation has always divided the left, including now. It's only because students have organized, specifically like encampments and protests, and people have been going out on the streets of LA, that it added so much public pressure that now the left is like, okay, we have to start leaning towards these people's, or appealing towards their desires, because, we're in a very, very tight position. So, like, there are still people on the left that if you bring up Palestine, they're like, oh, no, sorry, I respectfully can't talk about this. Like, it's like, so we have to organizing builds public pressure. And I think this whole idea around students specifically, especially from what I know students of UCI, have organized these encampments and protests and like just to add public pressure, and it's actually working. And I think we need to prepare ourselves in coalitions and, you know, movement like that, like rigorous movement, so we can, like for the next 15 years, it's the only way to battle that uprising in capitalism. It's the only way to break that chain. So, yeah, I think like getting people's interest and, you know, showing them that there is a way to help and there is a way to find their voice is very important. And yeah.
Yeah, again, I mean, I can't really disagree with the previous two panelists. I think they said it very, you know, eloquently and honestly better than I could have. It's all about organizing in the long term and creating a collective. I like that you brought up the collective memory and consciousness, because I think that's so powerful too. I also think, to your point about like, are people gonna like age up or age into like wealth or a different ideological position? I think no, just because things are just becoming so increasingly precarious and more precarious. I don't think that a substantive amount of people are going to move from maybe working class to middle class or middle class to upper middle class, that it's going to, you know, change or have any kind of major shift in the electorate, just because so many, the middle class is dwindling, so many people are working class, and I don't think that there's enough. Like, I don't think that there's going to be any substantive shift in, you know, just people aging into wealth that it would change the electorate. I also, to put on like my super nerdy like political science PhD student hat, your question about like people, older voters aging out, although older voters massively, you know, heavily vote Republican and the younger voters vote Democrat, we are still seeing young men still, you know, support Trump over Kamala. We also are seeing that many people of color, and I think rightfully so, are starting to lean away from the Democratic Party more and more. It used to be that like 95 to 98% of Black voters voted Democrat. That's numbers dwindling. Latino and Latinx voters are also moving away from the Democratic Party. And then most importantly now, Arab and Muslim voters are also shifting away from the Democratic Party as well too. So I think that, you know, I don't see a vision in which 15 years from now, the block of older voters who consistently show up to the poll and vote Republican are going to be replaced by newer, younger, progressive voters. And I also think that even if it was, then we're going to just have more Democratic, okay, let's say it does happen and we have more Democrats elected. It's like Obama in 2008, we have a supermajority. I don't think that the system would fundamentally change. Maybe we'll have better protections for access to abortions. Maybe things will be more openly gay-friendly, or maybe we'll have, you know, slightly better social safety nets, but I don't think anything systematically would change.
Yeah.
Oh, just I think my question is sort of mentioned in previous questions, previous answers, but because I'm observing this the American politics to be more and more polarized.
Mm-hmm.
And and as the campaigning of Donald Trump, it's getting even more the polarization is like even more increasing. So, from a broader perspective, like, do you see any potential like within this trend for it to be in favor of the left, or will it like push the politics more toward the right-wing populism of Donald Trump? And if so, like, what should we act toward it?
Are you saying polarization?
Polarization.
The increase, is it going to affect the left? Yeah.
So polarization between, when you're talking about the left, are you talking about like the Democrats versus Trumpism?
Not really. Like, they're more like, you know, right. I think I'm talking about a broader like left and right instead of the Democrats and the like the Republicans.
Right.
So I mean like more to the left.
I think that that's very much like a question that we have to deal with like in the here and now. Like I can't give you an answer, but I do very much have optimism in the fact that the right cannot keep providing these scapegoats for the issues of working people, because working people in America are extremely fed up with the last 4 years of the Biden-Harris administration. And a lot of that kind of results in people who identify as right-wing falling for a lot of the lies that like the right says, like whatever Trump and Vance say about like Haitian immigrants eating like dogs and cats, that's a very real problem that we have to deal with. But they can't keep getting away with that. Like, again, like I said, the Vote Socialist campaign, a lot of the volunteers have been building in the Deep South and in the Black Belt. So these are places, right, that tend to be like Republican red strongholds. But we had people on the ground, and we were talking to volunteers, and again, volunteers from like California and from many other states actually like went to the South. So I know people who actually like went to the South and had these conversations. And a lot of these people are really not fooled by Trump and by like right-wing rhetoric about all of these lies about like immigrants and this like poor section of the working class being the issue facing like other working class people like in the United States. People do fall for it. But that's the reason that this campaign exists, to intervene in this moment and to get into people's ears and make them understand that it's not immigrants, it's not whatever else the right wing, it's not trans people, it's not whatever fear-mongering the right wing is saying. So to your point as to like, where the United States population is going, I do have real optimism that the people in the United States are a lot smarter than we give them credit for, than they give themselves credit for. That it just takes organization to talk to people and to actually get on their level and to actually be like, hey, like, I know the issues you're facing because I'm facing them myself, and the answers don't lie in Trump and the answers don't lie in the right wing. And if we're just talking to right-wing people, and obviously we're having that same conversation on talking to Democrats. So yeah, I do believe that the people in this country, and it's not even really about like leftism, it's just about convincing people in this country that we are capable of running the society and we are capable of making decisions for our government. We do it every day for our families and our schools and whatnot. Why can't we do it at a larger level? Which is left, but it doesn't necessarily have to be talked about that way. It can be talked about in layman's terms, in terms that everybody can understand and digest, and eventually be separated from like the left versus right, like chatter, like altogether. Because ultimately, it's about how we plan scientifically and rationally a society that works for the majority of people.
Yeah, I like to say that there's a lot more left-leaning people than right. I do believe that, or I hope to believe that people are leaning towards the left-wing party. It's just that, I mean, I think we all hold on to ideologies that are towards the left. I mean, if you care about your job, like if you care about like not paying for the taxes that the rich don't pay for, or like, holding the rich accountable for their exploitation and fraud and all of that stuff, I think that you might would consider that you have left-leaning ideology. But at the same time, I truly believe that also the left is starting to lean right on some issues, on some broadened issues like foreign policy and global warming and like environmental changes. Like, and like Loriana said, I truly believe that there are some people in the Democratic Party that are part of Project 2025, 100%. So towards those people who are in the middle and, you know, haven't, like, don't know which way to go, like, I think you should, like, stick to your own ideology and fight for what you believe what's right instead of listening to, like, the noise. Because there's so much noise on both sides, and it's just that we need to start fighting for things that haven't been, like, achieved by both administrations.
Yeah, I'm trying to gather my thoughts. I agree that I think what you both of you said, that more people hold values that are much more on the left that we would view as on the left. My fear is, though, to your point, that they can't keep getting away with it, is that, you know, the right might, part one, because the Democratic Party, like, cannot campaign. The two examples that I look to that I've already talked about is, one, immigration. We have Trump, who, you know, brought this rise of xenophobia, and in 2016 and to 2018 it was all about resisting, and now the vice president, the party's nomination for president, is saying she wants to build a border wall, is trying to pass, you know, an immigration bill that was endorsed by Border Patrol, or even if you want to look at non-Harris examples in Texas. I remember one of the big things that you kept hearing on online discourse that came from more neoliberal or more people in the center was, oh, well, if you want, we have to elect Harris because, you know, trans rights or gay rights or women's rights are on the ballot. But then Colin Allred, who's running against Ted Cruz in Texas, literally said something, oh, I believe that boys shouldn't play in girls' sports. So we're already seeing major Democratic Party candidates and people capitulate to the right's framing. And I think that's very disheartening, because when they do that, the right literally does start to get away with it. And I'm seeing what I feel like I'm seeing is this large degree of manufactured consent that the media is, you know, putting on people by, you know, trying to create this reality where crime is everywhere. And but there's a lot of great jobs that are being added to the economy, and they create this, I don't know, this narrative or this story that pushes, I think, a lot of people to the right. So then to the answer of, okay, well, how do we fight back against that? How do we do that? That's where I, you know, go back to agreeing with both of you. It's organizing at the local level, and organizing local small wins, whether it's unionizing your workplace, getting, you know, fighting for protections in your workforce, like things like that, small tangible wins that you can point to and be like, I organized this, we worked together, and we achieved this outcome. So you have some, you know, belief, some optimism that organizing can get you the goals that you want. I had another point too, but I lost it. But yeah.
Can I ask Cruz mine?
Mm-hmm.
I just want to clarify that when I'm talking about the left, I'm not talking about the Democrats.
Yeah.
But also, just like added to your point, like I just want to emphasize the point that like the fight to keep people from having like the rights voices like in their ears and being convinced by them like is still like an ongoing one. And you can't say who will win. I mean, I think that we will win. But, you know, ultimately, like, I don't have a crystal ball. But that, like, I think just adds to the urgency that you organize, that you join an organization. And, again, that you join an organization. Yeah.
Chris, and then we'll go to Sebastian.
Okay. Again, I think some of my question has already been answered by earlier answers, but I just wanted to try to clarify two things. So I see this through line between the three of you of a rejecting of this two-party system or this establishment of the Democrats and the Republicans in American politics. And so number one, I guess like nobody has mentioned capitalism or has used the word capitalism in their rejection of the two-party system. And I wanted to ask, are capitalism and this system of two-party politics in America today different things? And how would you clarify that? And then number two, I would raise is socialism necessary? So is socialism necessary for unionizing? Is it necessary for like progressive political legislation? And is it necessary for a creation of a party that represents workers?
I think I did mention capitalism, but when it comes to like capitalism, versus the two-party system, I think that the two-party system is in place to protect capitalism. Both the Democrats and the Republicans protect capitalism, protect the interests of the billionaires. They do nothing but advance the interests of the ruling class, of the billionaires, and whatever the Democrats have to say to working people is mostly lip service. Like a lot of what Biden said to put himself into the presidency for 2020 has not happened. Like free community college, which I was holding out for because I went to community college. I didn't get fucking free community college. No, I paid my way through community college. There's a lot more important issues that he didn't deliver on. But I'm whatever. And when it comes to is socialism necessary, I represent the Party for Socialism and Liberation. So I don't think it'll be a big surprise when I say that socialism is necessary. And to back this up, I want to talk about I think two issues really that are the most glaring to most people right now, which is the very real threat of climate change and also the unending war and violence and havoc, which is really wrecked by capitalism and capitalist interests. If we continue to play into this system that offers no solutions for either of these issues, for this very real existential crisis that humanity is facing. On a side note, people are saying the earth is dying. No, the earth isn't dying. It's humanity that is facing an issue. The earth will be just fine without us. This is really an issue of humanity and an issue of an existential crisis. Capitalism is the driving force behind all of these issues in the first place. There are no solutions that can be found within it. I said this in my opening statement, but it is political suicide. It's suicide in general just to continue to think to have a strategy to put your faith into the system that is, again, driving these issues in the first place. Socialism is a system in which working people have the political power to make decisions for ourselves and for our society. And if you want a more in-depth view on how this will look like in wherever, in the United States, whatever, you can talk to me after and I can give you sources or we can just have a conversation. But if working people were in charge of our society, we wouldn't be seeing these ridiculous things like when the hurricanes came through a couple weeks ago. The FEMA shortfall for taking care of these people, for providing essential services like find and rescue operations, for providing housing, for providing essential food and water was $8.7 billion. And on the same day that was announced, the U.S. announced that it would be sending $9 billion in military aid to Israel. Are you fucking serious? If the people who were in the South were in control, had economic power, do you really think that they would be sending $9 billion, the same amount that is required to take care of people who are suffering now, to go and genocide and bomb and starve people in Lebanon and in Syria and in Gaza? No! It's insane! It is actively it's insanity beyond belief, and the fact that we even continue to legitimize and talk about the two-party system as if it's a real thing that will save us is insanity. We need to stop thinking about that. We need to talk outside of that. We need to build a real alternative, and that is what this Socialist Party is here for. Because we may not be, a real political force in this country, but that's how every movement and revolution starts. You have to build somewhere. You have to start somewhere. And we are building now. And we are already talking to thousands and moving millions across this country. So yeah, that's my answer to that.
I think the two-party system is the mouthpiece for capitalism. I truly believe that. And it's they will constantly be the mouthpiece because they are benefiting from this idea of capitalism. And, most of everything, most of our tax dollars, everything, it goes to feed the two-party system. It goes to feed their needs and their desires and what they want to do with the country instead of listening to the people's voice. So is socialism necessary? I absolutely think it is, because socialists are the only people that have been advocating for police brutality or like worker union rights or like labor union rights or even the genocide of Gaza. So it's just like all these issues are only loud enough and like build enough pressure because the students came out to fight for them. The socialists came out to fight for them. If socialism didn't exist, I truly think that the two-party system would engulf every single person in it. So I think socialism has a really great deal of pressure into making change and to rile up progressives and uniting every single person together. It's the only actually ideology I've seen where people have actually united together. I haven't seen it with the Democrats or the Republicans. Most of the people in the two-party system are very much divided. There are Democrats in Senate and Congress that are fighting against each other. So there's a huge element of dictatorship in there, and with socialism, it puts the people above the government. It puts the people's rights above the government. Your voice is heard before the government's or the state's voice. So I truly believe that it is necessary, and it's the only thing that has been protecting like everything that has been going on. It's the only thing that has been encouraging people to go on strike and protect their workers' rights and like protect like basic human decency that isn't protected by our own government or the two-party system.
All right, yeah, so the first part about capitalism and the two-party system, yes, absolutely. That is, again, completely concur with what has already been previously said. The only thing I think I can add that's different is looking at the campaign finance side of it. We live in a system where 96% of the time the candidate who raises the most money wins. You can essentially buy people's votes, and that just allows for, because we've now decided that money counts as speech, that allows for corporations and special interests to buy politicians and for them to buy a seat at the table and for people's voices and grassroots efforts to be completely mulled over in most cases. I mean, look at Cori Bush or Jamal Bowman. They speak out against the genocide happening, and then AIPAC funds their opponent, and their opponent primaries them out. So I do think that, yes, it's capitalism is what enables the two-party system, but we also have a system of campaign finance that allows this cycle to be perpetually in place by making it almost impossible for grassroots candidates to ever, or people-powered candidates to ever have a viable seat at the table, and for most of almost all of Congress to be bought out by special interests. And then to your second question, when you say is socialism necessary, are you thinking it as an ideology, as a system? And then necessary for what? For like a liberation, for like a better future? Like, is that what you mean?
I guess I was like, for the UAW, for the purposes
Yeah.
of the UAW,
Mhm.
is socialism necessary? For the purposes of labor organizing, is it necessary? For all of these like individual things, is socialism necessary? Or is it we can possibly do that under a capitalist system? And what does that mean?
So it would be a million times easier under socialism than it would capitalism. Like, I'm not by any stretch of the imagination gonna, capitalism makes organizing hard. But I also think if we wanted to completely overhaul and transform our system, socialism would be necessary. But I also think that we are still seeing, again, to try to be very cautiously optimistic, we are seeing labor wins still happen happen in spite of capitalism. That's what I should say. And they're not happening under capitalism because capitalism is just casually allowing it. It's happening in spite of it. But again, we have a weak labor movement compared to other countries. We have, like no labor candidates that run. But I still think that you're looking at, the fact that our union in 2 years was able to win 80% wage increases, that we have a union that not only just protects, our rights in a contract, but is able to go on strike, unofficially in solidarity with Gaza. The reason why I can't say officially is because we can't strike for political causes, which again, maybe we would be able to do that under socialism, but the reason why we went on strike in June was because of how the UC cracked down and unfairly treated student protesters and activists. So I think that labor specifically can still do a lot and have wins in spite of capitalism, but socialism would make it so much more easier.
So, really quick, I know we had one more person that had a question. I just want to give one final chance because we did start a little late for this to be so ideally answered quickly, but this is sort of our final thoughts and wrapping up. So this is the final time to speak. So hopefully the question will be able to do that. Just keep in mind this is just closing remarks. We will continue the discussion, so if people want to continue talk to some of our panelists about the organizations, we're going to go to the Anteater Pub and Grill as a group. We can go. It's down the circle this way. So we're all going to kind of gather there, but please ask away and let's close out.
Cool. I guess gathering what we've talked about so far in your comment of careful optimism for the democratic, our two-party system, right? We've established our votes don't matter. We're going to be a blue state. But there is the question of the propositions matter, the organizations matter. There is something within the political system that tangible knowledge that we have to learn, and we do learn by being part of this electoral system. So I guess A, is there any propositions that you want to give a 5-second shout out to? And B, what do we do?
I cannot think of them off the top of my head, but our union, our local UAW Region 6 and UAW 4811 does have a candidates guide. It's on, right, Alex? On our Instagram? But we do release a guide for all the propositions. We also both recommend and endorse, so we have different, levels of how much we support things. We recommend voting for certain candidates strategically, and then we actually fully endorse candidates we think that are pro-union and pro-labor. I know there is I think it's 32 or 33, but it's putting a cap on rent prices or rent hikes, and I think that's very important given that, even here, the university is literally trying to price graduate students out of its housing. So I'll give a 5-second shout out to that, but if anybody's interested, we do have, Mark, wow. Here we go. That's Prop 2, Prop 33, I had it. Look at that. Limit rent control, and then Prop 34, limit voting no to limit healthcare spending. And there we have a whole list of things that we endorse as a union. I'm on the political organizing committee along with Mark, Alex, and other union adjacent people. And then so what do we do now? Again, I think a common theme that we all three of the panelists have touched on is organizing outside of electoral contexts, organizing in your workplace. I always try to end things on being cautiously optimistic just because I think neoliberal pressures try to dampen our political imagination and our imagining of possibilities of a different political future. And I think that only by organizing with each other and talking to each other and building connections and working in solidarity with one another is how we're going to form any kind of feelings of optimism and not feel dread and not feel beaten down, because being on the left is so fucking hard. It's hard to feel like most, if not all, of candidates or people who run for office don't want to work with you. But that's the important of, I think, one, still utilizing organized labor. Like I mentioned in my opening remarks, I think it's one of the last remaining truly like. Oh, do I have to get that?
Yeah, we have to. Are you all coming in? Yeah. Yeah. So just.
Yeah. Oh, I don't want to keep talking. I want you guys to have the chance to.
Oh, yeah, I can't think of propositions on the top of my head either, but if you go to titanydsa.org, we do have a ballot guide, and we took a lot of what PSL and DSA came up with on their ballot guides, and we put it into ours because we share some of the same perspectives, the same ideas, and it is a time for unionizing and organizing. So I truly think that we could do a lot by voting on propositions based on DSA's ballot guide and as well as PSL's ballot guide. So, but I think the most important thing, at least from what we said on this panel, is to mobilize, and YDSA National is always looking for organizers. You could literally organize from your home, and literally we do national calls like weekly, and we try to reach out to people and hear them out and see what are their needs, and we want to know how can we meet them as a student organization as well. So I think that it really comes down to, both these great panelists have said, it's mobilizing, it's organizing, it's networking, it's listening to the people instead of being the mouthpiece to capitalism, and trying to fight for your rights harder than you ever have before.
As to voting, the PSL works with Peace and Freedom Party here in California, which is the party that Claudia and Karina are on the ballot with. Peace and Freedom is a historic party. The Black Panthers have been on this, have run under this party, so this is a very historic joint thing, and we did put out a voting guide. Just a really, really important thing: if you live in Santa Ana, vote yes, vote yes, vote yes on Measure D. Measure DD, which allows undocumented citizens to vote. And as to what do we do? Organize, build genuine bonds with community. Understand that we are at a very, very critical moment in human history, that we are facing a genuine existential crisis. Understand that the coming years are going to be fucking tough, and shit's gonna be hard, and shit's gonna get dark, but it does not have to be that way. I'm gonna pitch the PSL. The Party for Socialism is dedicated to building socialism here in the belly of the beast. We think that it's necessary to end the genocide in Gaza. We think that it is necessary for the total liberation of Palestine, for the total liberation of every other nation under the boot of the United States, and to get the boot off of the necks of ourselves, of workers here in the U.S. We're a lot of different people. I'm in the PSL. I've been in it since I was 19, but there's also people who have been in it since its inception over 20 years ago, who have fought against the Vietnam War, who organized people's medical programs during the AIDS crisis, and we are committed to building socialism and to the overthrow of capitalism and to really building a genuine alternative to the hellfire that we see in this country. So when it comes to what we do, organize and build, and also touch grass and go see the ocean, because it's really necessary. Nourish your soul so that you can be a better fighter against this system.
Okay, on touching grass, let's have our